Hi everyone, thanks for coming and joining again for another video. I finally managed to edit part 2 of the psychologists panel. I've got part 3 recorded, still to edit, and we're most likely going to do a part 4 because we just can't stop talking about this case. But today's part picks up where we left off last time, and we go into listening to the phone calls between Rick and Kathy and Rick and Janice, i.e. I put in inverted commas the confessions. We talk about Wyler's confession and overall around Rick's kind of state of mind while he was incarcerated at Westville. So I'm going to play the video through. I'll be here in the chat if people want to have a chat as we go through it, but I won't interject with any more thoughts. I'm allowed enough as it is in the panel. You don't need me adding any more commentary on top of that. We will get Diana's thoughts at some point too, as a fellow Psych over there in the States. But today I'm just going to play the panel of the three of us speaking about the phone calls and alleged confessions of Rick Allen. Enjoy. I'm going to move to listening to some of the recordings of phone conversations between Rick and his wife, Kathy, and also there's one call between Rick and his mum. And these are going over a period of time. So I'm going to give you the dates at the beginning of each one. We're going to listen to a little bit of the audio and then get your thoughts. Now, there are quite a few of these. We may not get through all of them, but let's start with the first few and have a chat, and then we'll see if we have time to go to a few more. So without further ado, I'm just going to pull those up on the screen so that you guys can hear them. So note for the audience, Mel and Ash have not heard these tapes before. Okay, so the first one we're going to play is from November the 14th, 2022. So you'll remember that Rick was arrested in October 2022, late October. So this is a couple of weeks into his incarceration. And this is a phone call between Rick and his wife, Kathy. I've chopped off the first minute and a half, which is just a notice from the jail about the call and things like that. And hopefully it should start where they're actually speaking.
All I want to do is be able to help you. Okay?
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying anything, but if it gets to a point that it's too much, you just need to call the investigators and tell them to come and get me and bring me to you, and I'll tell them whatever they want me to tell them, because whatever it is they want me to say, I'll just say it.
No.
I want to be able to make this stand for you. And for everybody else, certainly because of this. I love you too much. And every time I talk to you, I feel like it's going to be the last time I get to talk to you.
I know. I wish I could hug you.
I can't explain what's been going on.
No.
I don't want you to worry about me.
Yeah.
I'm a man and I'll take care of myself, but I'm worried about you. And that's all I do is worry about you. So, and you let everybody else know how much I love them, won't you?
You need to hang in, honey, okay?
Huh?
You need to just hang in there, because they're going to get you an attorney soon, okay?
Will you just let everybody know how much I love them?
Of course I will. They already know, hon.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
Nobody loves me anymore.
Stop. That's not true.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I know what you told me. I know what you told me, and I believe you.
Yes.
I just, knowing I'm never going to see you again, or at least it feels that way. I'm just saying, If it gets too hard, just tell them to cut and get me and bring me to see you, and I'll tell them whatever they want me to say.
No. It's okay.
Okay. I don't need you to try and be strong for me. Okay? You need to be weak. You need to be held. You take care of yourself, okay? Okay? I know. But you need to get the help you need. I can't help you. I can't tell you anything that's going to make you feel better. So please just make sure if you need Mom or Brett or anybody that you're going to them, don't wait.
Okay, I know.
Did you get back to work?
No,
Okay.
they don't want me there.
They don't?
They're afraid for me.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. They're afraid for me and they're afraid for themselves, so
Okay.
just do the best I
I
can.
understand.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, baby.
You have 1 minute remaining.
I'm sorry, baby. Just one more thing. I fucked up for you. I just love you so much, babe.
I love you too, Mommy.
Okay? I'm not going to keep calling.
No,
I wish I could see you, babe. You don't know what I'd give to see you just one more time. Because I don't know that I'm going to make it. But you just know that if anything happens, I'll see you in the next lifetime. I swear I will, okay? Okay. You take care of the family for me. I love you all.
I love you too, sweetheart.
Okay. Bye-bye. It's good to hear your voice.
I love you too,
Bye.
sweetie.
Okay. It's going to cut us off here.
Okay, I love
Okay.
you. Okay.
I love you.
So that's a pretty heartbreaking call to listen to. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I will just say that because I have auditory processing disorder, it was a little bit hard to hear at some parts, but I think I got the gist of it. But yeah, definitely very emotional. And this was just was it a month or so into his incarceration?
A couple of weeks. It's a couple of weeks in.
Yeah, which would make sense. I mean, like, such a huge adjustment, and yeah, they both sound really, really distressed. Yeah, you can tell, like, it's so much to have to, just adjust to and even make sense of.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very emotional. He sounds very dejected, like he's given up, and he's already saying, "I'll say whatever they want me to say." Yeah, it was hard. I agree. It was hard to hear some parts of the conversation, but you definitely get the gist and the emotions um, behind the conversation. Yeah.
So one of the things that people who think he is guilty say about that call is that they find that suspicious that he says, I'll say whatever is needed to be said. I don't see it that way. I see it as him saying, like, I'll do anything to just close this chapter for you. I don't want you to suffer anymore. If they want me to admit it, I'll just admit it, and then at least they'll be off our backs. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I was just saying, like I do agree. I think, I mean, again, I think that it's a bit of a stretch to actually say that, in the context, right? Like when someone is, I guess that distressed, surely, like, it's like when we're kind of at wit's end, then anything that would, end the suffering is very compelling. But I would agree, like it kind of leans more on the other end that, I mean, it doesn't prove that someone's guilty if they say that. It's more like a voice of desperation, if anything.
As you actually said that, Ash, I thought about when I was going into labor with my first son, I remember being like, cut this baby out of me. You know, it's like you're just like so uncomfortable, and you are in that desperation, like get it off, get it out. And I can even think of a time when my mum, we were on a ship and she was like really, really seasick, and she's like, I just want to jump overboard. Like what, into the ocean? Like, so I mean, those are kind of just simple day-to-day life examples of where we're like, do anything to get rid of this right now. So that's how I saw it too.
Yeah, to me, they both sounded, like distress and also scared with what lies in front of them, right? And what they are facing. And to me, the fear overtakes, and you're wanting to do anything to change the circumstances. So I agree with Ashley. It sounds more like a cry of desperation when he says, "I'll do anything and say anything they want me to say." Um, I don't think I would have ever thought it sounds suspicious that he's purposely said that. I don't think I would get that from it at all.
Another comment that's been made about this is that he sounds selfish, which I don't hear that at all. I hear him saying he cares about his family, and I think he does. Like, it is hard to hear at points. The audio is pretty bad, but he says, if you need to move on, I want you to live your life. So I think that's notable. And the other thing I was going to note is at this point, he still does not have his own lawyers. As you can hear, Kathy says, we're going to get you your own lawyers. So she has, at one point when he's arrested, tried to bring a lawyer on board, but they just don't have the money to pay. And so as a result, he's waiting on a public defender at this point. So he's not spoken to a lawyer. And this is now 2-3 weeks into this whole situation.
I'm curious what do you think people mean when they say that he is being selfish? Like what are they referring to, perhaps?
I think they say things like, it's all about him, and, it's about like how his life has been affected, and you don't love me anymore. And they say things like that. It's like, it sounds like I mean, look, I find it hard sometimes to get into the perspective of people who see this quite differently to me, I suppose, because sometimes I feel like, that things can get completely twisted and misinterpreted. But I don't get that vibe. I don't get the vibe of anything unusual really about that interaction. Like, I think that's quite an understandable reaction from someone who's been incarcerated for the double homicide of 2 young girls, in a small town where he does probably feel like the world hates him. There were probably already at that point people crying out to him from other cells in the prison saying things like, baby killer, which does happen when he's been incarcerated. So he would know what people would think of him, even though, he isn't guilty. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to tar him with that brush, all over the news, splashed over the news. It says, Richard Allen is Bridge Guy, and he's the murderer of Abby and Libby. So a lot of people did hate him at this point, including a lot of people who now think he's innocent, because we didn't have the information back then to understand what prompted the arrest and what was kind of going on behind the scenes. So, yeah.
I think that... Sorry, you go, Mel.
Yeah, thanks. I think there is at least 2 occasions I heard him say, "I worry about you," to his wife, to Kathy. That doesn't sound like somebody who's selfish, because he's thinking of her, he's thinking of the family. He's mentioned again, tell the kids I love them, and also I think, he doesn't come across as selfish in that conversation to me.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I mean, I remember hearing that as well. And again, I was just gonna, this is just kind of more like bringing in some, psychological, I guess, nuance to it, is that I think a lot of times, I mean, all of us as humans, we all have our biasness. But sometimes when the biasness takes front seat, then that's where like there is attention bias. And, if people are already, set as to him being guilty or even like him being innocent, then there is a tendency to see things from only that perspective. So a lot of it can be taken out of context. And the thing that we try to do, like as psychologists, for instance, or what we call like a scientist practitioner way of thinking and looking at things, is that we make hypotheses, like, so we make guesses about what might be happening, but we also always look at counter facts to kind of go like, okay, what is it more likely to be? Is it more likely this or is it more likely that? So every time we're kind of like checking our stance. And yeah, so even as we're doing this, and like I know where you stand with it, Amy. And at the same time, it's like, I see that there is value in looking at it from all angles. And but at the same time, I think it's so important to recognize, like there is sort of the two factor. One is like what someone says, like in terms of the words, like word for word. And then there is also how the person says it in the context of what's happening. That's so important to consider. And I think if we don't do that, lots of things are really taken, it's very inaccurate, like it's grossly inaccurate if we only look at the words as it is.
That's often an issue where we just, we say, the person said, I did it, well, and which is going to come up a little bit later. I did it though. If it said, well, yeah, I did it. It was me and I did it and I did, that sounds maybe more genuine than I did it. I think I did it, And so anyway, that's going to come up a little bit later on. One last thing I was going to point out in that recording there is a little bit of a change in affect, when he starts to ask Kathy about her job. And again, these are the sorts of things that people jump on and say, well, he cleared up the tears very quickly when he was asking about the work. But I guess as a psychologist, I guess we see this all the time. I'm sure you would agree. We have our clients in tears 1 minute and then they've wiped everything up and they're talking and they're laughing sometimes. And the reason for that is that, we have these bursts or waves of emotion, and then either the emotion kind of passes or a defense mechanism kicks in and we kind of pull ourselves back together again. So to me, that's actually not very odd. I mean, I've had plenty of clients come speak about very distressing things, start crying, and then they talk to you really nonchalantly about, how someone they love died. And so, you kind of, again, I guess you need to look at the full picture rather than say, well, that's weird, he just switched off his emotions.
But it also shows, he was asking her about her job, whether she started work, and she said, no, they don't want me there. And it reflects to the fact that he was so concerned that he had to, change the way he asked her the question, right? Because it became about her then. Asking her, oh, how come and whatnot. So I think that's given, right? When you are checking in on somebody and what's happened to them. So I think, in fact, that it gives you more evidence that he's not being selfish.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Okay, guys, so we're going to skip ahead now. This is April 2023. And as I've mentioned a little bit in kind of giving you the historical information about this case, this is when the decompensation has started around the beginning of April, and it lasts through April, May, and then a bit into June. So this here is the earlier end of it. So let's listen to him. This is a phone call between him and his mum. I'll see if I play it all. I may pause it at some point because there are obviously a fair amount. There's another 6 calls, so that would be an hour's worth of listening to calls, which we may not be able to do. But yeah, I'll play a little bit of it and I may pause at some point. So let me pop this one on the screen.
Yeah.
How are
Good
you?
to hear from you. Good to hear from you.
Yeah. Been trying to get a hold of Kathy all morning, but this stupid phone system doesn't seem to be working right about half the time.
It cut us off Friday, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure it did. I got a hold of her once today, and then it cut us off before I had a chance to really talk to her, and I haven't been able to get her back since. So,
Okay.
Okay. I was just curious to see if it would let me through to you. So that's good.
They had a lot of real bad storms.
Oh, in Delphi or?
Well, in this whole, in all of Indiana. There was tornadoes and everything.
I thought I heard something about tornadoes. I know we had a little bit of hail at one point, but
I will.
All night.
They may not have internet or anything either.
You still there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, if you talk to Kathy today and I haven't yet, just tell her I'm okay, and I'll talk to her as soon as I'm able to get through to her.
Oh, okay. I will. Oh, okay. I will.
All right. Hey, are you going to church today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good, good. Where are you going to church at? I didn't even know you were.
It's Story Church. It's there at the Roxy. There at the Roxy Theater in Peru.
Really? Why there? What made you decide to go there?
Colleen, my friend, he started going, and I started going after I wrecked the van.
When did you wreck the van?
Oh, it was in February of last year.
Oh my God, you've been going to church that long?
Well, I've been going probably for I'd say since last summer.
How did I not know you were going to church?
Well, I just started going, and then I decided I needed to get back with God again. And I figured He's been sparing my life for a reason all these years.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and I'm glad that I did, because I wouldn't have made it through all this without Him.
Yeah. So, did Kathy tell you that I told her the other day that I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior?
Oh no! That's so wonderful. Oh.
I didn't know. She told you or not. God's really important to me right now. I just, to hear you say that you've been going to church for that long again just makes me happy.
It makes me happy. And that Kathy's going and all that.
Okay, well, I could go on all day, but I'm going to try to get a hold of Kathy again, and if not, then I'm going to fall asleep at some point because I haven't slept. So, hopefully I can get a hold of her before I fall asleep, but if not, I know that I've talked to you and that you'll let her know that I'm okay now.
I will.
I've got a family that's always going to love me no matter what, and
yes, you do.
I've got God, so, and I know that Kathy's got God, and you've got God, and that's good enough for me. So, I know that He is not going to let this last forever, and
no, it's not.
We're all going to be back together eventually. He'll make that happen. It may be today, it may be tomorrow, it may be 6 months from now, it may be when we're together again in heaven, that it's going to happen. And
I just think God's going to work a miracle through all this.
Yeah, I think He already has. I mean, Kathy sent me a Bible. I didn't accept God into my life until March 21st of 2023. So that's a week ago, and a half.
Yeah.
And I never would have done it if I hadn't started reading the Bible. And I wouldn't have read the Bible if Kathy hadn't sent it to me, and
She's been trying for a long time to get one to you.
And I questioned, when I called her and tried to tell her that I had accepted God. I struggled to know if it was really this Bible and if this was actually a Bible, because I don't know if you know this or not, but the Bible that she got me doesn't even say the Holy Bible on it, on the front.
Yeah, but it's just worded so you can understand it better.
Sure. I didn't know if you knew that. It just, on the front it says the message. So after I accepted God into my life or accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior and got into my life and told Kathy that, she told me that first she had to convince me that I was actually reading the Bible.
Yeah.
And then I asked her where she got the Bible from, and she said that Dr. Frank had given it to her.
Yeah.
And so today I was calling her because I wanted to make sure that the next time she saw Dr. Frank,
Okay, guys, I ended up playing more of that. I guess I do think that gives a little bit of context. So as I mentioned to both of you earlier, and you saw in the interrogation videos, Rick was not a religious person prior to his incarceration. And what you can hear here, obviously, is a shift in that. Now, I'm not a religious person myself, so I'm curious to hear what your opinions are in terms of this shift that we're hearing in this call.
It's quite interesting. I mean, I've got lots of thoughts about that. I mean, for one, it was actually, because this is a call with the mum, right? So mum was already going to church, apparently. Also, not like ongoing, like it only started like a year before the recording. Would that have been before he was?
It sounds like before he was incarcerated. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But was it kind of when the trial started, or like?
No, so I mean, from what she's saying February 2022. So there was no focus at all on Rick until October 2022. So seems like it's coincidental, I suppose. But whether she's been going more regularly since this, I think is probably the thing, because it seems like they hadn't spoken about it. He wasn't aware that Mum was going.
Yeah. And who is Dr. Frank? I'm just curious.
No idea.
Okay, yeah. I mean, like the only sort of, I mean, not critique, but like, just kind of one way to look at it is that, this is someone in a very vulnerable position. And if they have people, giving like the Bible, and I'm also hearing like, again, like without kind of, going to too much specifics, like I did grow up going to church, and I don't anymore. So I have some context in terms of the understanding around Christianity and religion. And, when he said that it's not the Bible, but the message in front, it tells me that it's more like a more contemporary version of the Bible. So like evangelists and like people who, like are more kind of, what's the word? More active in sort of, spreading the word of like Christianity, and it could be that the people around him or who he has contact with, like actively practicing Christians, and I mean, in someone in that sort of more vulnerable position, like it's not unlikely that I'm not saying positive or negative, but like the likelihood to be influenced, and also like if you think about it, like there is also a lot of long-standing evidence and sort of this pattern where people who are going through something like a major like crisis in their lives, like would want to look at something outside of themselves. And like religion is one of them, right? So I would think that it definitely has a part to play with what he's experiencing.
Yeah, and definitely from working in a correctional facility. I mean, you've got really, the chaplains are one of the main groups of people that the inmates actually have more of a positive interaction with. So in the facility I worked in, it was a rehab jail. So there was a lot of caring professions, we were called the bleeding hearts, available for the inmates to talk to and to get some compassionate words from. But I imagine in a lot of the correctional facilities over in the States, that's not the norm. There are obviously psychologists, because we're going to be talking about one a little bit later, but often the chaplains do make themselves available and are around. So there would be, I guess, potentially that interaction. And I think, yeah, just generally people will turn sometimes to religion when they haven't previously had strong spiritual or religious beliefs, when they're in crisis, when they're looking for something to help them make sense of what's going on. And it seems in this case that's what Kathy and Rick have done, and to some extent his mum, even though she'd had some engagement with the church prior to that. They weren't a highly religious family, and it seems like they're really desperate at this point, and they're trying to find something to hold on to.
Yeah, I certainly noticed the shift, right? I mean, given that, yes, the first call was with his wife a few weeks in being incarcerated, and now this is obviously a few months after. But you see him going from sounding fearful to now sounding hopeful. I mean, the hope is that it's almost like you need to have a sense of hope. And that is for him, I guess, extending that to, I guess, more religious kind of affiliations, to hold on to something that will make him be more hopeful. And yeah, so that's what it sounded like to me in his conversation. And I think he was especially moved when he heard that his mom was going to church. So that's what I hear is a shift from being fearful to a sense of hope, I guess, or holding on to anything that would give him something to, I guess, go on.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you guys picked this up. I felt like there was some other shifts that were the subtle shifts, but they're I think they're present. There's almost a childlikeness to the way that he's speaking. I feel with his mum to begin with. I feel like his tone has changed in some regard, and there's almost this lightness that sort of sounds a bit childlike. And then I think the other thing, the sort of subtle indicator that maybe something's going awry is, he had to be convinced by Kathy that this was a Bible. And whilst I appreciate it wasn't saying the Bible on the front cover, that seems a little bit unusual for, at least in my opinion, for a grown man to be doubtful of whether something's a Bible. And he repeats it a few times as well. Whereas if he said, oh gosh, I didn't know it was a Bible because it didn't have the right title on it, but of course it is. They've written it in this new way or something. But I don't know. It sounded like there was this little bit of an edge of suspicion and a bit of almost a hyper focus and a perseveration around the Bible. Now that could be a coping mechanism, like you both kind of alluded to, that this gives him hope, and maybe I'm just biased by knowing what happens next, but I do feel like there's a few little signs there that maybe the way that he's processing the world is changing.
I think you picked on something, Amy, because even initially in the call, I've also, like, as I'm listening, I've made some notes. I also picked up that a sense of suspicion because what he commented on about not being able to get through his wife, and he makes a comment that I don't know why I couldn't get through to her, but I could get through to you. So you hear a bit of flavor of that suspicion there as well, and he's not referenced it once. He said that twice during that conversation. It was a bit echoey, but I'm pretty sure I heard him mention at the start of the call and somewhere reference it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely some perseveration showing up now, which I don't know, guys. From the interviews with the police, would you have described him as perseverating on points? I mean, I think he was verbose in those. He's definitely, chatty and gives a lot of detail, but I didn't feel like he got stuck on things there. Whereas now I feel like in this conversation, not so much the one previously, there is a little bit of a repetition in what he's saying.
Yeah, it's not very sort of overt, but I see the threat of that of what you're saying, and I mean, I'm thinking like this is also then, if anything, highlighting that flip between, like, back then he was very trusting of the system, right? He came into the police station or wherever he was being interviewed with that, sort of openness and like very trusting of authority, of the legal system. So he was still, chatting with them in a way that was like, like being buddies in that sense. And there's this sort of that suspicion that's showing up now, and understandably so. Like, he, if we go along the thread of, if he was innocent and he's being put in for, whatever reason, I can see why the person would, not. Well, he has to make sense now of his new reality, and how someone does that. It wouldn't be based on, I guess, like an existing, human system, right? Because he doesn't believe that he doesn't have a sense of autonomy in himself, so that can't be relied upon. He doesn't have the other systems to support him and help him out of this situation. So of course, like, then the other factor would be then going beyond that, which is, like religion would more or less allude to what's outside of this world, I guess.
Okay, so we're going to go to another call. This is, I think it's the next day. I think the previous one was April 2nd. This is April 3rd, so still similar sort of time frame. And this is at 8:45 in the morning, and he's speaking to Kathy. So this is a fairly short one. We'll quickly play that one.
What's going on, sweetheart?
I did it.
Well? You did
No,
what?
I did it.
What?
I killed Abby and Libby.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't, Darren.
Yes, I did.
Don't say
I don't know why.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't, Darren. You're not feeling well. There's something wrong. They've messed up your meds or something there.
No, I evidently did it.
No, you didn't. Why would you say that?
Because maybe I did.
No, you didn't, dear.
I think I did.
No, you didn't. They are screwing with you there, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. There's something wrong. They are messing with you. They are messing with your mind.
Did Dad tell you I called?
Yeah.
What did I say to him?
I don't know. I talked to your mom, but she called me in, and we're just worried about you because there's something's not right.
Is there a way to talk to Dad?
No, honey, I'm not with them right now. And there's something wrong. They're screwing with you there.
What do they say to Dad?
They have done something to your food, or they've done something to your meds. There's something wrong. Don't you ever say you did anything, because I know you didn't.
I think I did.
No, you didn't. Why would you say that?
Because I think I did.
No, you didn't. You know you didn't.
I wish I could say I didn't. I don't know.
You don't know. See, exactly. There's something wrong. They're screwing with you. They're trying to get you to say things. They're trying to mess with your mind.
No, I deserve it, I guess.
There's something wrong. No, you don't.
I just wish they would kill me or let me apologize to the families at least.
Dear. Don't talk anymore. Just don't talk anymore. Okay?
I'm sure.
Don't talk anymore. I need to get hold of somebody there.
So there we have the first, I guess, recorded confession. What are your thoughts?
Doesn't sound like a convicted confession at all. Like this,
No.
he sounds really different from before, and yeah, very, very odd as well. Very flat in the way he comes across. Flat meaning like, I mean, it's a term that we use like in psychology, but like, yeah, not a lot of emotions in his voice. Very different from how he was. He's very emotive, more often than not. I don't know what happened in jail, if he's been given antipsychotics or, medication that usually, well, when it's properly given, it does help a person to calm, but sometimes the side effects, or if it's like too strong, can also make someone more dull. But also I wonder about the sense of like that helplessness of, helplessness. But I mean, there's also this tinge of like, I don't know, what is it, like resentment, anger, the kind of thing where, it's like, just tell them that I did it. So then there's a way out, and at least they can apologize to my family, for whatever's happened. Yeah, like I'm picking that up as again, very contextual. Yeah, nothing of that tells me that this is like a confession to to accept.
Yeah, I agree with Ashley. I mean, if you look at it from, if you were to conduct a mental state, just listening to that, that in itself would tell you, how incongruent he is, so to say, in terms of what he's saying, how he's describing, and how he's saying what he did and then changing his mind. So there, it's so changeable and so variable, right? So how can you take somebody like that to then classify it as a confession? Because he's never once said, I did it, I think I did it. They're saying I did it. So this is changing. Just, I guess it's more evidence that his mental state is not stable. That's what I picked up from the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he says, I think I did it, but what if I did it? There's a lot of questioning. I must have done it if, that, because that's what they're saying. So it sort of sounds like he's heard it enough times. He's in this terrible situation. He mentioned in the last recording, which is just the day before, he hadn't been sleeping. We've started to see some little subtle signs of paranoia. So there's a lot going on there, and he's just trying to make sense of it. And I think he's not medicated at this point, though, Ash, other than the antidepressant that he's taken, even pre-incarceration, which I think is fluoxetine. So there is no other medication that we're aware of. I'm not sure, though, because there may have been instances where he was sedated, based on how he was.
Yeah, that's a possibility, because like sedation, as I know, like I've been working in forensic before, even people without that psychosis or schizophrenia history, like do get given things to sort of like tranquilize them, temporarily, for whatever reason, like, resistance or whatever. Yeah. I was going to say something about that. Oh, the theory of gaslighting. If someone's been told over and over something, then it's like, at some point you're like, if everyone thinks so except for me, then I must be wrong. So maybe I just didn't know that was it. So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess this is a person who has had a chronic lack of confidence in himself and in his capacity. And so I feel, again, as we talked about when we were discussing just the pre-morbid kind of presentation, again, someone who's vulnerable to and susceptible to taking on board other people's opinions and judgments. And he's basically in this facility, and we will talk a little bit more about what's actually happening behind the scenes, but he's alone. And the only people around him are people who don't like him because they're guards or prisoners that think he is a child killer. And he's got these sort of limited, tiny little bursts of calls with his family members. That's not a lot of contact. So definitely kind of living in his own little echo chamber in his head, where he's just going round and round probably all of the things that have been said to him over the past 6 months that he's been in this predicament. So so clearly not something we would hang our hat on in terms of saying he must have done it.
No.
Another thing I thought when I first heard this, and I mean, there are some more as well, which we can listen to, but I just thought about, like, if I really truly was guilty of something and I was finally going to confess to it, and obviously I haven't been in a situation where I've had to confess to anything as big as this, but, if you think about some time where you've had to confess to your parents that you've done something wrong, once you open that floodgate, you start telling them lots. At least that's how I would be. I mean, not maybe necessarily single detail, but you don't just keep repeating I did it. I think I did it. You say, okay, look, I did do it. It happened because of this. You start kind of giving rationalizations even, that you don't just repeat, I did it. I think I did it. So to me, that's just how I would imagine I would be if I were in this situation. I'd want to be telling you more about what I did or rationalizing it so that you could understand why I did it, because I don't want you to hate me. I wouldn't just keep repeating.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a really good point. And if he really was trying to confess and, even change the tides, like, yeah, he wouldn't just say, I think I did it, because that was all he could give. Like, it wasn't anything more than that.
Yeah.
I don't know if there were other times that there were any other confessions, but this was a phone call with the wife. But yeah, it doesn't prove someone guilty by them saying that. Yeah.
No, and I guess, this is a good point. I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of a timeline. So this is very early on. I believe that is the first time he says he did it, but it could be earlier to the prison guard. So I'm just going back through my notes, because of course there's a lot here. We've got testimony of multiple prison guards, as well as so prison personnel, as well as psychologists, as well as these phone calls. So just looking here, the first incriminating statement he made was actually a month earlier, in March of 2023. He requested, he put in a request slip to the warden saying, I'm ready to officially confess to killing Abby and Libby. I hope I get this opportunity to tell the family I'm sorry. And then April 5th, so that's a couple of days after this phone call that we've just heard, it says, envelope slipped under the door with March dated slip, told the guard, prison cured my depression and anxiety. It allowed me to find God. Do you want my Bible? And then April 7th to 10th, so this is again this sort of week following this, he's made a number of statements. So, dear Lord, forgive me for molesting Abby and Libby, Kevin and Chris. Not sure who Kevin and Chris are. I killed Abby and Libby all by myself. Nobody helped me. I'm not crazy. I'm only acting like I'm crazy. Kathy, I did it. I'm guilty. Run, Kathy, run. And he's also started to repeat patriotic songs like God Bless America while confessing. We've then got April 20th to 29th. We've got I want to talk to the warden and confess. I'm guilty. I killed those two girls, so I have to kill myself. If I killed them, I killed them. I killed Abby and Libby. My wife wasn't involved. I'd like to confess. How do I prove that I'm insane? And then we have some times where he actually speaks to the psychologist, Dr. Weiler, so we'll go through her testimony in a minute as well. But this continues on. We've got I killed Abby and Libby again in May. We've got in June, I killed Abby and Libby, mixed with religious ramblings. And then it sort of stops, and this is where he has now been involuntarily medicated with Haldol. And then there's one more episode, which is actually February the following year. So there's a big gap. And then February 2024, he says, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for killing those girls. Now, these are all statements that have been overheard or that he's made to prison staff. So, again, we're basing it on hearsay of what they've heard. There isn't necessarily any recorded, well, actually, there is no recorded evidence of any of this other than the written note and these phone calls.
Can I ask Amy quickly? Look, and I'm sure it will come later on, but if he's made all these confessions, let's say, wasn't there any then follow-up through asking him more questions? Okay, so you're saying this, but how did you go about actually killing them? And actually then, corroborating that with the actual, I guess, the autopsy reports and do so. Because just by him saying it, did they ever ask him for details and all that?
Well, I don't know exactly, I guess, the legalities of this. I haven't looked into it as much, but my understanding is after that call that we just heard with Kathy does call his lawyers. So he now has a team of lawyers who were really supportive of him. And I don't know how exactly they intervened, but he was never officially interviewed by the police, by law enforcement involved in the case after those interrogation videos that we've previously watched. So even though he's saying he wants to make a confession, there isn't any indication that anyone is taking a formal confession from him. But we will get to Dr. Weiler, who is the psychologist in the prison, and she has a session with him, or a couple of sessions with him, where he tells her the full story. So we might go to that next, and then we can go back and listen to some more of the calls to give you a little bit more of an idea of, I guess, his mental state.
Yeah, sure.
Sounds good.
So we're going to change gears, well, not change gears, but just sort of shift into Dr. Wala. And just to give you guys a little bit of a intro into Dr. Wala. So she is a clinical psychologist who has been working in this particular facility. She's, I think, the lead psychologist in this facility. Now, one of the things I didn't mention before is that Richard Allen's being held in a facility that would usually be primarily for convicted offenders. He's on remand and he shouldn't be being held in that sort of a facility. So it's a little bit different, the prison system over in the States versus in Australia. So the remand inmates can be held in a normal correctional facility here in Australia. There is a remand section though within that, but they actually have different facilities. And I always get this confused between prison and jail and penitentiary. They all mean different things. I thought they were all just synonyms, but they're not in America. And so basically the law enforcement and the prosecution said that he needed to be held there for his own safety because he was at risk of other inmates. So because of the nature of the crime being the murder of 2 juvenile victims and the horrific nature of the crime and the small community, they deemed it was safer for him to be kept in this facility and in a solitary cell. They consistently say it wasn't solitary confinement, but it sounds very much like that. And we'll talk a little bit more about the conditions in the next part. But Dr. Wala is a psychologist there. She's been seeing him regularly since he came in. So initially he was on suicide watch when he was first incarcerated, which makes sense given the nature, again, of the crime and his history of severe depression and anxiety. He was then signed off of that and then has sort of had some follow-up at intervals. And then from April onwards, I believe, or around the time where this change occurred, she started seeing him on a daily basis. One of the things that gets Dr. Wala a lot of flack is that she was involved in online social media communities discussing the murders. So as she was treating him, she was engaged in, I believe, Facebook groups, watching YouTube, and actually not just watching, but actually engaging in discussions. She went to the Monon High Bridge and walked the trails. And on top of that, she actually herself admits to sharing with Rick that she has been in those communities and that there is support for him from those communities. I'm not sure what other details she provided to Rick, but this obviously is an ethical issue that we could probably unpack for an hour or so, but we might do that another day. But that's a little bit of context there in terms of her behavior in this case. So I won't get your thoughts on that because, like I said, I think that's another rabbit hole we can go down another day. I know all of our listeners probably would love to hear us talk about that, but let's stick to the confessions and to Rick today. So I'm going to read a little bit of the transcript that is from trial, and this was the testimony of Dr. Wala. She said, so he said he wanted to confess to his crimes and went on to tell his story. He reported seeing his parents the morning of the crime. He stated he was supposed to go eat with them, but opted to get himself a 6-pack. He reported drinking 3 beers and then finishing the rest later. He stated, I bundled up. Once on the trail, he stated I laid in wait. He reported seeing the girls and following them to the bridge. He mentioned doing something with his gun and stated, I think that's where the bullet fell out. And then he said, I ordered them down the hill. He stated his intention was to rape the girls and mentioned he thought they were older than their biological ages. He said he saw a van which scared him and caused him not to follow through on raping the girls. He said they crossed a creek and then he cut their necks. He indicated wanting to make sure they were dead. He reported covering their bodies with tree branches. He said he exited the area by keeping off the trail so as not to be seen. He said he returned to his vehicle, which he parked by a nearby building. He stated he managed to continue living his life after time passed by and he hadn't been caught. So then she's asked, did you ask him about the crime that he'd been charged with? And she said, I didn't. So Did you make reference to his prior confession in order to elicit the statement? She said, no, I did not. Was there any indication prior to him making this statement that he was going to tell you about his crime? And she says no. So basically she's saying she didn't prompt him at all. There's a little bit further in terms of his demeanor. So she says, I want to say he almost appeared relieved. He did have some concerns about his property and fearing he would not have food and water. I assured him they could not withhold things from him. He mentioned he couldn't sleep due to safety concerns. He discussed a transfer to another facility. He reported previously consuming feces because he feared telling the truth. He reported not knowing why he blocked the camera or window with his mattress yesterday. He stated he would not kill himself because he was too much of a coward. At the same time, he stated that if he died, he wanted his wife to know he loved her. There is more, but I guess thoughts so far? What do you think of that confession? How does it sort of hold up? You're now getting some details. I guess probably to put it in context, though, many of those details are part of the narrative about this. So they would have been things that he was asked about at the interrogation. They would be things that would be in the discovery, which he would have received at this point as well from his lawyers. And the discovery is all of the investigative information, witness statements and autopsy photo, like crime scene photos. So a lot of that information was already provided to him, where he parked, the bullet, as you know from the last interview. The thing that I guess the prosecution have capitalized on that is the comment about a van. That's something they said only the killer would know. That wasn't a detail that was provided to the general public. And they've married it up with a van on a private road around that area at around the same time. However, there's contention around whether that van would have been there at that time exactly in terms of the timing. And also there's contention around, so if you intended to sexually assault these young girls and you got scared off by seeing a van, then why did you then take these two teenage girls across a creek, which was not shallow by any stretch, and into another wooded area, and then not only not sexually assault them in this more secluded location, but actually slit their throats? And sorry, this is pretty horrific stuff. And then, redress one in the other's clothes and then stage the bodies with all those heavy tree limbs, as I've mentioned last time when we spoke. So it's a little bit, I guess it defies logic a little bit as well. And I guess, we're not here to be investigators. We're here to provide more of a psychological commentary. But, I mean, that does sound a bit bizarre. You were scared off and then, okay, sure, he had a gun on him. If he didn't want them to report him, then why would he not have used that? Or why would he not have gone to a different location and then still carried out the act that he initially intended to? So, I mean, again, like I said, that's probably more a bit of a bit more detective work. But yeah, any thoughts at all about what you heard?
So I guess, again, looking at, when you just read that or when you hear that in isolation, yes, you can see why people would be convinced about that there's a possibility, right, that he has done this. However, later on you mention about his mental state, about him eating feces and then covering something to do with the mattress, right? So that also highlights that he's not in the best mental state when he has had this conversation with the psychologist. So I would question, about where that is and what he was on during making that, I guess, giving those details of the confession. Because to me, that doesn't sound like somebody who is in absolutely sane or stable mindset to then give a recount like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out the exact dates here as well, which I should have already had in my notes. But yeah, realistically, this more detailed confession seems to be, I'll get the exact dates for our next discussion, but around the same time as these phone calls. So it's around the April 2023 period, which is absolutely when we have a lot of strange behaviors, nudity, talking to self, lying in his own feces, smearing his feces, bizarre prayers, disorganized thought, dreamlike grandiosity. He's saying things like wiping out the world, nuclear war, I caused World War II. He's asking to get on the phone to Trump. There's severe sleep deprivation as well. So, it's interesting that he he has this period of coherence where he's telling this detail, where he's giving this detailed narrative, and yet on the other hand, he's smearing feces and eating feces.
So how do you then, rely on the validity of what he's saying, right? The other thing is, and I could be wrong, because when we first started hearing, when he was first interrogated and with the two policemen and they were showing him pictures, again, I could be wrong, but there was a mention of a van. I'm not sure, but
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know. Somehow I recollect it like that, but I could be wrong. I could have got my facts mixed.
That was
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure. However, I guess first of all, a van is a common vehicle, particularly in crime. How many stories do we hear about vans? So, if you're thinking about creating a sort of narrative of a crime in your head, like that might not be so unusual. The narrative also sounds a little bit like the sort of narrative you would be given by investigators. Like, was it that you wanted to sexually assault them and then something spooked you? Did you lay in wait? Like, there's certain terms there as well that people have picked on, like lay in wait. That's not really a term that most of us would use, and yeah, I mean, the bullet thing is another issue. He said he did something with the gun. That must have been where the bullet dropped. Well, the bullet wasn't found on the bridge where he abducted the girls. It was found at the crime scene, which is quite a distance away over a creek and in another area. There's no way that bullet could have flown over that. So there's things there that are inconsistencies in what he's saying, and yet we're doubling down on the few things that might be somewhat consistent, but majority of them have been discussed at length. I mean, this also is a crime that occurred 5 years ago. He's seen news reports. He was a witness that day. He was on the trail. So surely, of course, he would have been watching the coverage and knowing a little bit more about it. And then we've got this psychologist who is digging into information that has at some points mentioned vans. And this is where people start to kind of query, like, how much was provided to him.
I would say that because, this is how the human mind works as well. We always fill in the blanks, right? When we don't have information, we try to make meaning. That is the difference between, like, say, for instance, an animal and a human. We have our thinking parts of our brain that would make interpretations of things. Now, it's hard to know whether an interpretation is true or not, or factual or not, but the reality is that that's the nature, right? So I would be thinking that, like, that's what everyone else in public is doing, and there's information floating around, or, when whoever's involved or interested in the case. But for Rick himself, like, he would also fill in the blanks, right? Like, if this was the accusation, then how does it make sense? I will also add to that point that something that Mel mentioned that reminded me when I was working in forensic years ago, and so that was in the remand facility. This was in a different country, but it's quite similar that we were assessing people for their mental state, and one of the important criteria is that if someone is of sound mind, that's when they can actually legally be able to make a confession. Like, it's actually legal for them to do so. And if they're not of sound mind, regardless of what they say, it can't be taken as fact in that sense. And that's the reason why it's so important to recognize whether someone has that level of ability to do so. And I mean, if you think about it, right, if Rick has been in this situation, and assuming that, okay, like, if he's actually been scapegoated to be the one to, I guess, take responsibility for the crime, then this is literally, like, I guess, part of the plan, like a person who is vulnerable and then put, to wit's end, and then develop, like, psychotic symptoms. And, so then there's nothing that he could say that would be, I guess, taken as it is. But they can use that, like, I guess, to justify as well. Like, he was probably not sound, but it happened, which, as a whole, I guess that's the legality side of things. But drawing back to, I guess, psychologically speaking, like, I think the decompensation and regression of his behavior and everything is concerning. And also that whatever that he is describing there, I would agree, like, it's very generic things, like generic in the sense that, like, I think a common man would be able to come up with a story like that. And yet, I mean, I haven't seen the pictures, but like, it doesn't kind of seem to fit that very bizarre, like, description that I've heard around that. So how do we then, put the two and two together? Just doesn't fit.
Yeah. An interesting statistic as well, that in about 30% of DNA exoneration cases, innocent defendants made incriminating statements, delivered outright confessions, or pled guilty. Now, I know people will say, well, some of those people probably pled guilty to, take a lesser charge because they didn't feel like the justice system would do them right, and sure. But the reality is there are plenty of cases that, you see on the news. There was one recently in the UK where someone had been incarcerated for decades based on a false confession, and the DNA evidence proved he was not the perpetrator. And again, that was a vulnerable man. So yeah, these sorts of confessions are absolutely plagued with issues. So I guess one of the other things that kind of comes up, I've just sort of scrolled a bit further forward in her testimony. So she's saying that, in terms of her clinical observations, he's saying odd things, he's repeating things like that perseveration, like he didn't want to miss Easter, there's paranoia. But then suddenly he has this period of lucidity, and she says that it was organized when he was sharing information around the crime, that he didn't have any psychotic symptoms at that point. So basically her kind of idea here is that he snapped out of his psychosis and was able to provide this really coherent, organized narrative of the crime, and then he went back into it. I guess partly it's her saying that, partly it's her also saying that, there's malingering here. Perhaps he wasn't psychotic at all. What would you expect? So like, if you ask the average person who was not a psychologist, who has no real, in-depth understanding of psychosis, what would most people do to try and fake being in a psychotic episode?
Yeah, like talking to themselves kind of stuff. And
yeah, right. Talking to themselves, saying that they see things that aren't there, like all of the common symptoms, right? Mm-hmm. And yet what we have here is symptoms that, I'm pretty sure that most people who want to fake psychosis aren't going to go as far as to eat their own feces.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's a bit nobody would do that. I mean, we can't say nobody would do that, but that's a fair assumption to make that that's taking it too far.
It's pretty extreme, and it's not just one isolated thing that he did. He drank toilet water, he smeared the feces all over himself. There is a lot of stuff that, is kind of going outside the realm of like, I want to pretend I'm not sound of mind. I'm trying to actually find a list of all of the different behaviors, but there's a lot.
And if he really wanted to say he was malingering, why would he then give this detailed recount of, the murder?
Well, exactly, because this is another issue. Like, what on earth is the motive here? Because he didn't plead insanity. He didn't ever claim that he was unfit to, or incompetent to stand trial. So, if he's trying to cover up now that he's made these confessions by now saying, that he's psychologically unwell, then you would expect there to be more made of incompetence to stand trial, insanity defense. But no, there is no benefit to him to, acting psychotic.
To me, when you're going through this, and I know we are breaking it up in piecemeal and, going over her transcripts, the psychologist, but to me, it just comes across as if, they are kind of contradicting themselves in how they're presenting the information. It just seems a bit, I don't know. Maybe because we're not reading the full transcript, maybe that's why.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I think that there are kind of logical flaws in a lot of the arguments, for sure. It just doesn't really add up and make sense.
And I don't know if this is sort of, I want to try and keep to the point, but I'm just thinking as well around psychosis. It's also not like a black and white thing. Like, there are varying degrees of it. And I forgot to mention, like even when you think about assessments around like sound mind, it's also in the context of the crime. So, like just because someone has psychotic symptoms, it doesn't mean that they were psychotic at the time. There could be so many factors. And like even someone who is actively psychotic could also have periods of lucidity. But then them having periods of lucidity doesn't mean that they're not psychotic. And so, it's really hard to kind of, I guess, pin it down to one factor or one.
Super good point, Ash, because I think this is something that wasn't hammered home enough, I think, for the jury at trial, this idea that somebody having psychosis, like a psychotic episode or experiencing psychosis, is not psychotic 24/7. And I've heard even other psychologists comment on this case in a way that says, well, there you go, that proves malingering. And I'm thinking, well, no, I mean, yes, there are people who are floridly psychotic and they're so kind of stuck in that episode, but there are plenty of people where they're going to still remember who their wife is. They're still going to be able to tell you what they did on their birthday. It doesn't mean that you completely, have lost all contact with reality. It means, though, that you are having some symptoms that are a loss of contact with reality. So, yeah, I think that's a misconception here. So having a period of lucidity, it's like saying, oh, well, you're not depressed because you just laughed when you had your birthday cake at your party or something. Like, essentially, someone can be depressed and still have short periods where they don't feel depressed. It doesn't take away from the diagnosis. So, yeah, I think that's a really important point for people to realize, that it isn't this sort of categorical psychotic, not psychotic, that there is going to be some kind of waves of it being more intense, and then times where, maybe he's a little bit more stabilized for periods, but nonetheless highly unlikely that he suddenly stabilized for a period and then got out this really detailed narrative of what he did in the crime and then becomes psychotic again. Like, to me, that sounds like the confession is part of the psychosis still. It's still part of him trying to make sense of his mind and what's happening and in this situation. And I mean, this is where I think there are other layers of mental health issues at play as well.
Yeah, and if you think about one of the factors in psychosis, like reality, right? Awareness of what's real and what's not real. Like, there can be a lot of thought insertion as well, even if it's momentary. So yeah, I don't know how much of that would be, like I mentioned, in that sort of typical sense, like we tend to fill in the blanks in our minds. But when we have like an awareness or groundedness in reality, you can tell whether we're thinking about something versus what's happening in reality or what's happened. But when one's not stable, like it kind of gets a bit messed up internally.
But that's the definition of psychosis, right? It's altered reality. So exactly what you said, Ash, there, that, it's baffling how then they can consider this as a confession, isn't it?
And something else that Ash, you mentioned when we were speaking last time, and something that was always a thought in my mind as I got to hear more of Rick's own words, was obsessional thinking. And so, we've got this man with a history of self-doubt, of getting kind of stuck on compulsively checking that things are okay, like his stocks and his finances. We've basically got some of those characteristics of either generalized anxiety disorder and or OCD type things. And so I work with this population a lot, and people who are more prone to OCD type symptoms often get stuck on things they might have done. We call this false belief or false memory OCD, or real event OCD, where people will literally agonize over what they think they might have done. And a common example of this is where someone's driving a car and they think, did I run someone over? And they go back and check and they check and they check, and to the point where they end up actually not wanting to leave the house anymore. And I've certainly had clients like this, and I myself, as a history of someone who having OCD myself, have had these periods where I could start thinking, well, maybe I did do that, I'm not sure. And it almost has that sort of psychotic feel about it too. It isn't. It is, it's more an anxiety disorder, a disorder of doubt. But imagine when you put the combination together. And I think that's a possibility here in the case of Rick Allen, where we've got somebody who is already guilt prone, who ruminates, who has this need for certainty, who... And I mean, that ties in even with that first phone call today, where it's like, I'd rather just get it over and done with. I just don't want to be in this position. So I feel like, we've got that then mixing in with potentially a psychotic episode and this decompensation. And you can see it being the perfect storm, where he's perseverating on what could I possibly have done, and creating this memory in his mind of what possibly happened. I hope that makes sense. That was a bit long.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've got the last bit that we've got to do for next time is I will go more through what the facility was like, what his symptoms were like. I sometimes wonder whether I should have done that before the confessions, but anyway, and we'll listen to the last few confessions, and then we'll finish up with overall thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
That's good. Mhm.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.